Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's lesson, or this lesson, is going to be yet another intermission. It isn't going to be really required, but it is something I do heavily recommend you stick around for. So if you really just want to continue on to learning some of the core concepts, such as inheritance or events or other things, then keep moving. Skip this lesson if you really want to, but if you want to see how what we've learned can be implemented now into programs that are a little bit more interesting than using command line interface, then stick around because that's what we're basically going to do. As I said at the end of the last lesson, this lesson is going to cover graphical user interfaces, but only a little bit. We don't know enough to really fully understand graphical user interfaces yet, but I will show you how to at least start thinking about them or start using them, even if our understanding isn't complete. We know enough to use them, but not enough to fully utilize them. Before I go anywhere, I do want to say that we are going to do this in BlueJ, but Eclipse and NetBeans are far better at making graphical user interfaces. The reason we're doing it in BlueJ is because one, I don't want to switch over to another software yet, and two, uh, BlueJ is actually very informative on how this stuff kind of works, and I'll show you why in a little bit. We're not going to move to Eclipse or NetBeans. I've decided that. As soon as we're ready for graphical user interfaces, we'll switch over to Visual Studios. But for now, let's start with BlueJ. So before we go anywhere, we have to actually set it up because BlueJ cannot create graphical user interfaces or GUIs without an extension. So first, we have to go to Google and find an extension. I've already done this, but I'll show you where to go. Go to BlueJ GUI extension, or Google that, and click on the first result. Scroll down just a little bit and download this package right here, the simple GUI extension. Download it. Once it's downloaded, you're going to move it from your downloads folder into C, Program Files, BlueJ, Lib, Extensions. Right? So I'll highlight this bar up here so you can see that it's in C, Programs, Files, BlueJ, Lib, Extensions. The file you download, the GUI extensions.jar, needs to be dragged and dropped into this folder, and that's it. Once you've done that, you need to restart BlueJ if you have it open, and then we should be ready to go. Now, obviously, you're going to need to create a new project, but once you do have that project created, just go to Tools and use Simple GUI Extension. Okay, did it run? Oops, it's running twice. So we'll click on this and let me kind of navigate you around what's going on. This gray area is our graphical user interface, right? So we'll cover this a little bit more later, but when we open a window, when we open an application, when we open up something, Java always starts with a frame. A frame has an empty area in the middle that my mouse is kind of tracing, which would by default be empty. And it would have a bar up here with like a minus sign, this little max screen or resize button, and then the close button. The area inside of it is usually just blank, although what we're going to do is we're going to put a panel, and that's exactly what this is. This is called a J panel. Inside the J panel, we're going to put a button and a text box. Every time we hit that button, we want a line of text that says maybe hello to pop up on the text box. Yes, it's not a very exciting program, but it is very simple. And the key here is to understand the code that we're writing rather than creating something super fancy and functional. Because that's up to you, right? You can design your own graphical user interfaces, how they're programmed, what buttons do, what a checkbox does, what a label will do or say. All of that's up to you to program. So just to get started, let's drag and drop a button and then drag and drop a, not text field, text area. Okay, maybe we can kind of situate it so it looks a little bit nicer. And maybe I don't want this to be super big. One of the things that I hate about this extension, I love this extension and I'll show you why, but one of the things I hate about it is if you move your mouse too fast while grabbing the corner, it loses track of where you were. So move really slow, real slow. Okay, so if I were to save and run this, in fact, let's kind of do that. Let's go back. Oh, I have to save it first. You have to save it here first. And then in here, you have to compile it. And then void main string args. Now, as soon as we open this, it'll actually fail. And it turns out that this extension, I think, is really old or wasn't created properly. I'm not sure which one. But there's a problem with this Nimbus look and feel. If you go back to the GUI and you look at the code, this is the code that this extension is writing. When you save it, it'll take everything that's here and put it inside of your class file. The problem here, though, is the fact that you cannot edit this file. So every time you save it, it's going to update the other file, the actual class file. So this is, when you save it, it'll update this file, right? And yep. So what we need to do is if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see that the main method has this call that sets the Nimbus look and feel. Let's just comment it out and recompile. Go back to this and then run it again. And it's failing again. And for some reason this happens. But what I'll do is I'll just clear this out. And then I'll well, close it. And then I'll run it again. And then it just works. There's something going on with the extension. Don't worry about it. If it happens, just keep kind of like, just clear the terminal and then rerun it and then retry it. But make sure that that one line of code is omitted or commented out at the very least, because it's crashing the project somehow. Right now, if we click on this button, absolutely nothing happens. And that's what we need to do, is program that in. So if you have the GUI designer open, we need to make a couple edits here. And before I go any further, I want to warn you, and I should have done this sooner, but I want to warn you, do not close this GUI designer. For some reason, I cannot figure out how to reopen it and have this GUI. If we close it, it's gone. We have to manually edit everything from there. Okay, so we want that button to do something. How do we do it? Well, we need to kind of edit the code. So I'm going so far out of order, but if you look at the code, as I said before, this is everything that the extension is generating. This is not the actual code that will run. What it is it's telling you what it's going to write, because it's saying that when you save, it's going to save or write something, or write all that text to this. This is what we have to later edit. And I don't like that, because I can't edit something here and then have it save in the other file. So if I make a change and I save it here, I have to go back into this and scroll all the way back down and recomment this out. And I don't like that at all. So BlueJ is not the best. This extension is not the best, but someone made it, and it's actually pretty darn good for like 1 or 2 people who made it, whoever made it. I don't know who made it, but it's not bad. But before we even change or edit the button, I want to point out something. What you're seeing here is everything you need to know about how to get a basic program to work, or a basic GUI to just show up, right? So if I do public class GUI project, which is the name of this project, you'll notice that it extends JFrame. I don't want you to worry about that because we haven't learned about inheritance yet, but that's exactly what that means. It's inheriting something. And let's look at the variables. There are 3 variables inside this object, right? This class that we're making. There's a J menu bar, which is kind of like this file button up here, this bar right here. This bar is the menu bar. There's one button called button 1 and one text area called text area 1, right? That's what we set down here. When we place it, this extension automatically generates the code that is necessary to draw it. First, it creates them up here. Then, in our constructor, note that it says constructor, it creates a new button1, JButton constructor. And then it sets the boundaries, the background, the foreground. It enables it. It sets the font type. It sets the text to be button1. It sets visible to true, and so on. And then it does the same thing for text area 1. Creates a new text area 1 object, sets its boundaries, its location, or I'm sorry, yeah, the location, the background, the foreground, whether or not it's enabled, etc., etc., etc. The generate menu function is called somewhere in that, constructor, but I wouldn't worry about it because this is auto-generated and there's a lot going on here as well. At the bottom of our program, you'll notice that we have a main method, and this is what gets called. It is the main method, but this is what we're going to call. And you can see that it sets a property. It sets the look and feel of the entire GUI. And it invokes later something, the new runnable. Don't worry about that. But all you need to really know is that this is the main method. And this code right here is basically what kind of kickstarts this entire program to run. Okay? But look at all the code that's required just to get something to show up. One button, one text field, and it's all this code. This actually is not a lot, but this is why people like using GUI editors, because they don't like to have to kind of sit here, because what if you forget one of these? What if you don't set the background or the foreground, or forget to enable it or set the font type? Not all of these are required, but you can tell that GUIs are very, very detailed in what is necessary to get them up and running. So anyways, just to move on, we have a problem. The button does absolutely nothing to this text box. So if I click on the button, you notice I want to take a look at some of these two kind of columns here. This tab is the properties. These are all of the variables that are inside that button, right? The name of the button is the name of the variable. If I change it here, it will change it in code. If I change the location here, it'll change it in code. That's basically all we're doing is by using this easier to use menu, we're changing the code inside of here, and this extension is auto-generating that code. The second tab here are called events. Events are something we haven't covered yet, and I don't want to go into too much detail, so listen closely, but if you don't understand it, it's fine. An event is an object, but a special object, sort of. It's an object that listens for something to happen. In this case, it listens for all of these actions to happen, and as soon as that action happens, these events are going to call a method. So the button class has a lot of events, but one of them that I'm curious about is the mouse clicked event, right? When the mouse clicks on the button, it will call a function. Right now it calls no function. So let's make a function. I like to start my methods that handle events with an underscore. That's up to you though. By the way, the methods that are created that are specifically designed to deal or get called when an event happens, these are called event handlers. On button 1 clicked. Now in code, you'll see that there's the private void on button 1 clicked mouse event, right? And it passes in a mouse event, and that variable is called EVT. We can do stuff with EVT, but we're not really going to do it this time. But there's something else. How do we tell that event to call that function? Yes, we did it over here, but how do we do it in code, right? If you look at the mouse button, the button 1 section, you'll see that there's actually new code. Set methods for mouse events. This code adds a mouse listener. Remember how I told you that those events are objects and they listen for something to happen? When that thing happens, it calls a function. This is how we add an event listener. And you don't need to know the specifics, but we will cover up how we will cover not cover up we will cover how to specifically do this in a later lesson. But what it's saying is that the mouse clicked event tie it in with the on button one clicked event method, and that is down here. So this line of code ties that button that's built into the button class and ties it to that function. I didn't mean to do that. Now remember, you can't edit this file, which is kind of weird, but you can't edit it. So what I want to do is I want to hit Control Save, and we saved it. And if we want to edit this, we have to go here, and I think we're ready. This is as far as we're going to go. We're going to hit the button, and it's going to do something, and then we're going to move on. So remember, we have to comment this out because this is for some reason breaking the code. And here's our event handler, right? In here, what I want to do is I want to modify that text area to add some more text. So if you look at the functions, or if you look at that text area, you'll notice that the properties on here, one of them is just text, right? So in this script, what I should be able to do is do text area 1, because that's the name of the object, dot text. I think it has to be capitalized, but let's test it. I haven't done this yet. Plus equals hello, and then I want you to do /r/n, and then end it. So a couple things here. There's a string variable in here called text. It's either uppercase or lowercase. I couldn't find it in the documentations. We can kind of guess and check here. I'm not sure if it's going to matter too much. But what we're doing is we're saying hello, and then this /r is kind of interesting. The slash is an escape, which means that the following character has nothing to do with what I want you to put on the screen. It's more of a command on to do something else. For example, /r/n is equivalent to hitting the enter button when you type a document, right? /r is called the carriage return. See that blinking thing right there? That's the carriage. /r brings that carriage back to the beginning of the line. /n is a new line. So this is a carriage return and line feed. It's called carriage return and new line, carriage return line feed. So let's compile this. Cannot find symbol text. Let's see if we can do lowercase. Nope. So neither capital or lowercase text seems to be working, right? So it might be time to consult the documentation to see what we can do, because this is how you do it in C# and with Visual Studio, but obviously things are different here. So let's see, we have a new JText area, so I just want to look up what kind of object it is first. All right, we have a JText area. So I'm going to copy that and Google it. JText area class documentation. Okay, so if I scroll down here, it doesn't actually look like we have, well, nested class summary. It doesn't look like there's anything. It looks like there's a whole bunch of constants, but it doesn't seem to be maybe one non-constant thing. It doesn't seem to be a variable called text. So if we look at the methods, you see that there's actually an append. Appends the given text to the end of the document. Let's use that method instead. Appends the given text to the end of the document, does nothing if the model is null or the string is null or empty. So let's try that. Let's do, there it is, dot append, and it's a function. So we're going to put that, that in there and see if this compiles instead. Oh, I have an extra double quote. Right, Java's not complaining. Hopefully that's a good thing. And let's call the main method. There we go. /r/n isn't working, but maybe we can figure out what that is later. The key here, though, is a couple things. Let me re-walk you through this. In the constructor, we have all of our regular GUI stuff, right? We have our frame. Inside the frame is our panel, content pane called, our JPanel called content pane. Then we add our button. We set its color, size, background, foreground, etc. Then we take one of those events, those special objects that we haven't talked about yet, and we tie it to that function called onButton1Clicked. Outside of the constructors, we have our methods list, and specifically we have this method right here called onButton1Clicked. It sends a mouse event object called EVT. In this case, we don't do anything with it because we don't need to. There's a lot you can do with it, but we'll get to that when we come back around to events. But in this event, which is called by the button click, we call the text area object, the text area 1 object, and we append its string to say hello. Now, I want to know in Java, carriage return. How do you spell carriage return and line feed? In Windows, a new line is, oh, I have the slashes on the wrong direction. So let's do compile and then run. There we go. Now it's actually printing off the screen, but we don't have any scrolls or scroll bars or anything like that. You can Google how to get those to pop up when it is overextended or something like that. If we go back to this thing here, it doesn't look like you can change it from here, but there should be a way for you to allow scroll bars to pop up. That might be something that's inherited by this class or something else. The key here that I want to kind of bring back around is the fact that we created a very, 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 very simple GUI with one button, and that button just prints some text over here. The idea here, though, is that you understand that this has events in it. When you do something to this, whether or not it's the mouse is clicked, when the mouse entered, right? So like, for example, when the mouse enters, when the event gets called, this event gets called whenever the mouse enters the button area on the GUI. You can have it change colors. You can have it change shapes. You can have it change text. You can have it change whatever. When it exits, you can have it change back, or you can just have it change to a whole new different color. Whatever you want. Mouse clicked is when you quickly just tap it. Mouse pressed is when you press and hold it. Mouse released is when your mouse button will let go of it, which the mouse pressed and mouse released are sometimes used together. So this is a list of just a bunch of different events. The events can get tied to a function, and in that function you can do stuff to other objects that are on the GUI, or just objects or variables in the background, right? You might want it to calculate a number, right? Like an equal sign. You want to calculate a number and then print it to here. You can do both of that inside the event handler. And the event handler is the function that is called when the event takes place. So just to review, we had the mouse clicked event. We have the mouse clicked event. With this, we created it and tied it to this onButton1Clicked function that we created. It automatically, this extension tied it automatically with this line of code. And then we went into that code here and made it append that text. But you can do whatever you want. So that should get you far enough to understand some basic GUI stuff, how to create events and how to do stuff now. Whatever it is that you want it to do, you can do it. You can make a tic-tac-toe game, in fact, right now using this. Remember, though, do not, and I mean do not close this unless you can figure out a way to reopen it. Do not close this extension, right? So put down all your buttons and put down all your objects, then go back and edit the code and kind of go back and forth. But note that whenever you save it on the other one, it will overwrite anything you save here. Just to give you an example, let me save this. Saving it actually writes this out. So if I open this, yeah, our on button one click classes or function is now gone. All right, that should be enough for now. I do want to continue on and talk about functions next. So all right, that should be enough for now. So I want to continue on and talk about packages. So let's create a new project and we'll call it package example. Right, and let's close out the GUI example. So before we do anything, let's review and understand that a package is a group of classes kind of zipped up together into a single thing, right? So usually if we have a lot of classes that are really relevant to each other and we want to package them up really nicely for organizational purposes and distribute them to the internet or whatever, we want to kind of create packages. So if you just right click here, you can say that we want to create a new package and we'll call it useless package. If we open that up, you'll see that it opens up a new window, and we'll explain why in a minute. But from here, I want you to create a new class. I just want to call it useless1, and then create another class called useless2. All right, and we don't have to do anything with these classes because we know how to make classes, we know how to edit them. But let's save the project. Package saved, and let's kind of navigate to that where it is, right? I don't like where BlueJ puts them, but whatever. And then let's see, package example, there it is, package example. You notice it's just a folder, and the folder has 2 .java files into it. That's literally it. That's all this is. And so the nice thing though is that it'll give us a way to create a organization for our classes. So if I'm at the top, the main kind of area, and I make a class usage example, right? And then I open this up and I delete everything. Public static void main string args. Now, if I try to use that, I have to actually kind of import the package, right? So actually, I should show you that as well. If I open up useless1, you'll notice that it's inside the package called useless package, right? So if I want to use that class in our code, then if I try to use that useless package, if I just use that useless class, right, because there was a useless one do nothing equals new useless, Java's going to complain. It doesn't know what this is because it's not in the same package or it's not in the same file or folder or whatever. So what we have to do is we have to actually import that class into our project. So if we do import useless package and then dot, we can either say useless1, or if we have multiple classes that we want to import, we can just say star, and it's the wildcard. It's basically going to say just go into the package and look for it in there somewhere. The star means I'm not going to specify because it could be anywhere. Oops, this needs to be useless1. But Java is no longer complaining. And if I do like a system.out.println, it'll show that there's no errors. This code doesn't do anything, but at least we know that we can use it. What if you use a package that you found on the internet? Well, the first thing you want to do is you're going to want to move it into your project. But then you're going to actually want to import it into BlueJ. So BlueJ knows that it's being used. So this is where you would want to use libraries. So we have a package, but the weird thing is, or the thing that is that you're gonna actually usually find packages, or I'm sorry, jars, which are libraries. So if we do add file, we can navigate through our jar file and then just kind of import it, right? So you can have a jar file in your downloads folder, in another folder. It doesn't have to be inside of this project. But if I do add file and navigate to that jar and import it or add it through here, through the libraries, then what I could do is do like an import statement in that. I don't have an example here ready, and I probably should have, but you just have to use the import statement. Now, because Java knows where it is, or BlueJ knows where it is, because in the preferences you told it to add that custom or that jar, that archive, that class, not the archive, the library. It's right here. You're telling BlueJ, hey, besides the Java libraries that you have, I want you to point to and understand that there's another library or organization of classes somewhere else. And that's what you want to point to, is that jar file. Then once it's in there, if when you do the import statement, you're really telling BlueJ to pull a class from that library or that package, right? Because the library is like the big thing, and then inside of that is a package, and in that package you pull a class. You pull that class and Java uses it. When you're done and you export this project to be distributed, it'll include that class into the final project. I don't really want to cover it here because it's not something we're going to do a lot. We don't really need it, and it's not key for us to understand how programs and object-oriented programming works. But if you do want to learn more about that, feel free to look at different libraries online. I also just can't find anything online that's really useful for us to kind of learn with. Using import statements and using libraries is something that we will do again when we get around to C#. And we start doing GUIs in Visual Studio. But I just wanted to kind of show you guys how that works here. And I really want you to just understand that all it is a folder structure, right? It's just an organization. So how do you create your own jar, your own package, and everything like that? To do that, all you really have to do is just go to create jar, and the main class, there's none. So when you create a jar, it can actually end up working like an executable. Right now, we're not going to do that. We might actually in a second here, but for now, I'll just say none, right? Includes user libraries, includes source, and include BlueJ project files. That's up to you. Let's just hit continue. And then what I'll do is I'll go to my desktop and I'll just create a jar file called sample jar. Okay, and now if I go back to my desktop, you see sample jar.jar. Let's actually move this because I like working from here a little bit more. Let's see if we can do documents or something. Yeah, let's just move the jar into the documents. All right, I want to show you kind of something a little interesting. I want to change this to a zip folder. I want to open this up. And you'll actually see that there's a lot of metadata in here that BlueJ is forcing into here. So there's package.bluej, there's useless package, here's our class, or useless1 class because we compiled it actually. We never compiled useless2. But here's our 2 Java class, and that's it. This is extra stuff that BlueJ puts in there. This is extra stuff that BlueJ puts in there. I didn't mean to actually open it. This is the project file. So do you wish to update? No. And we're actually going to delete it. We're going to go back to BlueJ. And we're going to do this again, but this time we're going to actually create a main method. So all I'm going to do is print something to the terminal. Let's see, system.out.println. It's working. I actually don't know if running a jar will actually open up a command line interface, but let's try it. Project, create jar, and class usage example is our main class. That's where the main method is. That's why it's called the main class. That's where the main method is. And some classes of the project are uncompiled. All classes must be compiled. Okay, fine. Do it again. Let's not include this time. And then we'll go to the desktop. Let's go to documents again and just call it sample jar. All right, there's our sample jar. And if I double click on it, oh, it's asking me what I want to run it in. I should probably actually choose the command line interface, but I can't actually do that. So let's just hit OK, see if this works. It might not work, and it doesn't look like it is. But if we change this to a zip, you can see that everything here is the same. Useless package, there's our classes. There's our, notice that there's no .java file in here. That's because when we did the include source, we unchecked it. That removes the Java files when we export this to a jar. Actually, you know what would be a good example? Let's open that GUI project. GUI, first GUI project, there we go. Create jar, GUI project. We'll include the source, but not the BlueJ project files. And we'll put it back into that documents folder. And then we'll do GUI and then maybe executable. Right, so now, if I double click on it, come on. Oh, you know why? We forgot to change something. I forgot to comment this out, and we forgot to kind of make this again. So we got to do text area 1 dot append hello, and then that should be fine. Yep. Now we will do this yet again. Go to documents, GUI executable jar, save it. Do we want to replace it? Yes. There we go. Oh, I forgot the /r/n. That's okay though. You get the idea. And that's it. That's how we convert an executable into it. So if you want to create your own programs and have everything you need inside of it, the putting it into a jar or Java archive is how you can do that, right? So I don't know why there's these dot classes, but whatever. The project dot class, I think it's because I was editing it at the time. I'm not sure. But there's our source file. There's our compiled class. And then that's it. So this is how you can create your own executable files. This is how packages work. They're literally just folders within folders for your organizational purposes. This is how you utilize them. You go to preferences and add libraries if you want to add external libraries that are probably in the form of jars rather than just nothing, just folders. That's the more common way of doing things, by the way. The jar is just a zip folder, and inside of that we'll have like folder structures full of classes. So you're going to want to import the jar file here so you can use third-party or other people's archives and so on. I'm talking in circles yet again, but that was the big overview. So I'm a little happier with that. I'm going to review this and see if maybe we can make it a little clearer. But I'm actually kind of excited to get back into the swing of object-oriented programming. So I will see you guys in the next lesson.